episode 4 of the 360 podcast from Park Tudor School, an all-around look at student-centered education. I'm Laura Gallen.
And I'm Adrian Pumphrey. And today we continue talking with Scott Looney, head of school at Hawkins School in Cleveland, Ohio, and founder of the Mastery Transcript Consortium. We continue talking with him about the Mastery Transcript and its implications for member schools.
Most families and parents actually don't understand how college admissions works, and they think they do. So what happens is your kid's file goes to a 27-year-old who's been doing this for 3 years, and the first screen is just, are you in the range, right? And so I asked a dean at an Ivy League college, I said, what percentage of your applicant pool is completely admissible? In fact, how many times could you take your admitted cohort, throw them aside, and take the next best? And she goes, 6 or 7. I said, so you have 6 or 7 cohorts that are equally, before your professors are, yeah. So you're not being selected by whether you're actually admissible. You're being selected if you're interesting. Now, you have to be admissible to be considered, and 15% of the kids who throw their hat in the ring aren't. But what's happened when you read files, right, is they all look the same. They all have the same APs, they have the same classes, they have the same grades, they have the same test scores. So you quit looking at that stuff. It's not interesting to you. If you get a transcript that forces you to look at kids' work product or forces you to look at their signature project, not only do those kids have an advantage because they're actually fun to read. And reading, you would think that reading the files from the most amazing kids in the world would be fascinating. It's mind-numbingly boring, actually. It makes you want to pull your hair out. It's like, oh my, these all kids all look alike. So when you get a kid who has a unique profile, who's different, you kind of savor it a little bit. You're like, I got to read these about 7 a minute. Like, I might give this kid 10 minutes because this is fun. I think the kids who are allowed to pursue their passions in really unique and interesting ways and present them in different ways, I think they're going to be advantaged in this process. If I had to bet on which kids will get better college placement, I will definitely put my money on the Mastery Transcript kids. And when schools like yours and mine introduce it, we're going to make it an option. It's going to be a design choice. So we're not going to force it on anybody. If you want to get a graded transcript and grades at the end of your courses, fine. If you'd rather do it through the system, fine. But I'm going to let the free market win, and I have great confidence that over time it'll be the Mastery Transcript. It won't be. And here's another reason the Mastery Transcript is going to win. If you're a high school that adopts a Mastery Transcript, that means you're willing to let colleges see the actual real work product your kids are producing. If you're a weak high school and your kid's work product gets them an A, but it's actually not very good writing, are you really that interested in showing it to selected colleges? Your school will. My school will. The best public schools will. Best charter schools will. But really weak schools that give away A's like candy probably are never going to buy, which means that eventually colleges will realize, wow, it seems like there's a correlation between Mastery Transcripts and strong schools and Mastery Transcripts and high-level work product. And it's like currency. If that's true, they become valuable over time. So I wouldn't have started this effort if I didn't think that the Mastery Transcript could beat out on a direct competition the traditional transcript. It will. It just has to get into existence.
So speaking of which, I mean, what kinds of schools? Park Tudor is part of the consortium. What kinds of schools are adopting this already?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, 2 parts to that. I can tell you who's in the membership, but adopting it already the answer is 0, because the platform necessary, we have to build about a $5 to $8 million piece of software in order to make this done, because traveling with every student's transcript is hundreds, thousands potentially of artifacts, right? So there has to be a system to gather those artifacts, put them into files for review, temporary files, elevate those for admissions, submit the transcript electronically. And so we have all team. We now have 10 full-time employees who work for the Mastery Transcript. We're working with a design firm in Seattle to build we have 12 prototype working schools that are prototyping the transcript right now, which include about half public and charter and half independent schools. So until it comes out of kind of prototyping, there's no platform. If you wanted to start today, you could do the preliminary work, but we don't have anything to give you. So, and that'll take about another 2 years before I think a school like yours or mine will actually be ready to really think about introducing it. And realistically, most schools will introduce it in 9th grade. So it'll take at least 6 years before we're producing mastery transcripts into higher ed for the most part. So this is not a sprint. This is a slow walk. In terms of our membership, I started by aggregating independent schools, and from a very pragmatic purpose, which is we're known to have very high standards. So I wanted to make sure that you couldn't question the validity of mastery transcripts, mastery learning. We also are disproportionately influenced. We're 1% of the total population of kids in the United States. We're 10%, roughly 10% of the enrolled student body of the Ivy Leagues. And we're almost 20% of the full paying students in private colleges in the United States. So if we aggregate, we get a seat at the table to be able to sit down with college deans and say, look, we want to negotiate. But we never wanted this to be exclusive to independent schools, so we've opened up to public and charter schools as well. So we have, the only school type we haven't opened up to is for-profit schools. The board's discussing, I'm the board chair, the board's discussing that. There are pluses and minuses that are complicated, but so now we have public, private, charter schools doing this, and some of the most prestigious schools in the world. I told you that we were talking to Eaton and Harrow. They haven't joined yet. But we've Andover, Exeter, Spence, Dalton, Latin School of Chicago, Cranbrook, University School of San Francisco. These are all schools whose reputation, Park Duder, Hawken, whose reputations make it very hard for a college to say, well, how do we know that this is rigorous?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Well, I think, Andover's been around for almost 300 years, so they have a pretty good track record, and I think you can probably trust them. So I think by starting with those schools, we run the risk that this is an elitist effort, but by starting with those schools, we ensured that the legitimacy of the rigor was something that was probably a given. I will tell you, some of the most innovative schools in the United States are public. They're not independent schools. The public universe, there's 37,000 high schools in the United States. So even though the truly, truly innovative schools in the public system there's not a huge percentage of them in raw number, there's some amazingly exciting schools that are thrilled to have the opportunity to potentially use this to benefit their kids. So between having the numbers now, having the staff, having the money, and having a consortium that's international, public, private, and charter, we're an entity that has negotiating and partnership power, both with learning management systems, because we have to make the software work, colleges and universities, and by doing that, we don't go alone. The other advantage is, as Park Tutor decides, how do you create mastery credits, and how do you, all these other schools will be doing the same time. Built into our software will be a sharing library. So the rules are very simple. If you'd like to see Hawkins and all the other schools draft mastery credits for your own work, you can. But then you have to share yours when they're ready. If you don't want to share, if you're like, no, ours are proprietary, you don't have to, but then you don't get to see anybody else's. So if you want to be part of a sharing network, that's one of the possibilities. So you don't have to try to create these alone. You'll have some of the smartest educators all over the world creating very high quality standards, and you can borrow pieces and parts. You don't have to do it wholesale, but if Punahou creates an amazing creative writing standard and your faculty fall in love with it, if they put it into the public domain, they're giving you credit to use it, and vice versa. You guys might create something that a computational thinking credit that's everyone's like, oh, that's awesome. So eventually there might be some crowdsourcing, but there'll never be standardization because kids are non-standard in source schools.
So I hear you in the sense that there would be sort of a transition period of perhaps a school within a school. Perhaps you choose, do you want to go the mastery transcript route, or do you want to go sort of more of a traditional transcript route? Are you hoping that one day traditional transcripts will just be obsolete?
Yeah, let me correct something and then answer it. You don't have to do a 2-track system to do this. You can actually have kids sitting in the exact same classrooms, taking the exact same classes, where some of them are going to get grades and some of them are going to get mastery credit. So if, give me a class you teach. Or will you teach? Give me a class.
I teach the AP Language and Composition course.
Let's not use AP because pick a different one.
The 9th grade honors class, which is a genre
Honors.
course.
Okay, 9th grade honors class. So you can create the standards there, right? So let's say you have 16 kids in your class, and let's say 10 of them have chosen to be assessed traditionally. So you're going to mark up their writing, and you're going to give them back their feedback, and it'll have grades on it, or however you grade. The other kids in class will give the exact same assignments. You'll give them the exact same feedback. The difference is, instead of a grade, what you'll put at the end, at the top of their paper, is an indication of which credit folder they should put it in if you think it's good. If you think it's good, it's like, oh, this is really good. You should put it in this folder because you might want to see it later when you submit for credit. If it's not very good, you just give them feedback. There's no, you see no, you're saying, hey, just keep working on it. So then what happens is all that great work aggregates to a folder, and then if there's enough of it, the kid says, I think I'm ready. Each kid will have a portfolio advisor. They say, do you think I'm ready? And you go, yeah, I think you're ready. You submit, they get the credit, they move on. You don't have to change your curriculum, you don't have to change your program, you don't have to, all you have to do is give families the choice of how they want to get feedback. And now you can't have both. You can't have a graded transcript and you have to choose because the colleges will just default to what they know.
Okay.
So, and it's not a life sentence. You can pick a mastery track and decide after a year, hey, you know what, that's not going to work for us, so I want to go back to the traditional. It's okay. So 1 year at a time, you can choose. So it's very important that this be voluntary and that it be able to fit with an existing school. You don't have to retool your school necessarily. Now, do I hope the mastery transcript will give you permission to think about retooling your school and my school? Of course. And to answer your question, yes, I'd love to get rid of traditional transcripts and every single thing that's on them. And I know that's a radical statement, but we've been brainwashed into thinking that separating learning into academic disciplines and giving credit at a fixed time makes sense, and that this 5-point scale is a legitimate way to set. Do you really think that an A at Park Tudor is the same as an A at a different? No. We have a school, public high school that remained nameless in my town, where the average GPA is a 3.78. I'm sorry, I don't trust that that's on a 4-point scale.
Yeah.
So their A's are the same as my A's?
Right.
I don't think so. But we pretend like they are, and we treat the system as. So there's just so many paradigms built in the current system that are taken as given in fact, that if you really back up and look objectively, maybe made some sense in their day, but they don't make much sense now. And the biggest one is content labeled courses, actually. Carnegie units are right up there. Before the advent of the ubiquitous availability of all of human information at your fingertips, you had to have a massive amount of information with you at all times, because your only alternative was to go to a library or an expert, and they're not always available. It doesn't mean knowledge is not important. There is no such thing as a skill without knowledge. That's a false dichotomy. It's about proportionality. The whole 19th and 20th century system is all about knowledge acquisition, not knowledge application. The problem is this generation of kids needs to apply the knowledge they know in unique and novel ways, not just store it and carry it around with them. And so it's just about what you privilege versus what you, and right now there's a complete disequilibrium with reality.
I mean, I know for me, when I moved here from the state, from the UK 5 or 6 years ago, I learned about I used to teach in a high school downtown here in Indianapolis, and I learned about the GPA system, and I was like, hold on a second, we as teachers give these subjective grades, and that's the number that goes on their transcript. It was really surprising to me. I mean, this is a pretty revolutionary idea, and it's many people have a sort of fear of the unknown, and it's a scary place for perhaps parents, students, faculty.
Yeah.
Firstly, how has the Hawken community received the idea, and also, do you have advice for schools, school communities, really? About how to navigate the unknown with this?
Sure. The first advice I would give school communities is to let families know very explicitly that it's going to be a little while before this starts. So if you're excited about it, calm down. If you're worried about it, don't be nervous, because the right way to implement this is to make it an option for families. So what I've said is, look, if you've come to Hawken because it's your favorite steakhouse, don't get angry because we added fish to the menu. We still have steak. So relax. We'll show you what this is. If you decide you have a hankering for seafood, try it for a year. If you don't like it, order a steak next year. So I don't think it's high risk, actually. I also have complete intent that when we formally introduce this in my school, when the platform's ready and our credits are written and all this, I will have a slide with a very long list of prestigious colleges that have publicly endorsed this. So either you believe their endorsement or you don't. And I actually, again, believe that those kids actually, and we know that they'll be. I'll give you an example. So in our entrepreneurship course, we have to give grades because we haven't moved away from grades, but we give no grades until the end. Right? It's all feedback. It's an honors course, but the criteria to get in this honors course is different. It's not based on your prior academic performance. It's based on your willingness to work hard, and you have to apply to demonstrate your enthusiasm for the subject. Right? There's a process you have to go through to get into the class. So we take some kids who don't have great academic records necessarily. A lot of them do. There's a mix. So there's a boy, you don't know him, so I'll call him Austin, who was very smart, very intellectually facile. Everyone knows that, but was always underachieving in his classes. Looked bored, wasn't engaged. So he had to really work hard to get himself into Entra, and so he did. He had I'd say a B- average at Hawken. So he went through Entra. Applied learning was his thing. All of those talents we knew were there sort of emerged. He became a group leader. His projects were brilliant. He submitted one of those projects for his application to NYU. There's no way this kid on traditional metrics would have had a chance at NYU. And they took him, and he's rocking it.
Wow.
So I think this is going to advantage these kids. They're going to be able to throw themselves into things they love and demonstrate competencies and capacities that traditional, narrowly defined academic learning doesn't allow to be exposed in really authentic, measurable ways. He submitted a video. He submitted his final project video and a 3-minute snippet of it because he knew the colleges wouldn't watch the whole thing. And that swung the reader and said, wow, I'll advocate for this kid, and he got in. This happens over and over again. We keep seeing this over and over again. Kids keep submitting either their essays are about their Entra experience or their evidence. And so, why is it that this one course seems popping up so frequently in the way kids choose to present themselves at colleges? Because it's the first time in high school that they gave the best of themselves, and they're proud of it, and they want to show it off to colleges. And it's working. It's getting them into good schools. So it's not going to take very long before people realize you can't out GPA and AP the competition.
Right.
That's not how you're going to win.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a good way to lose. So that's one of the reasons that I don't think it's actually as big a risk as people think it is. They'll feel that way because it's new. But it's not going to take long before they realize, hey, wait a second, these kids over here seem to be having a lot more fun, love school, are doing amazing things, and they all start getting into great colleges. So that's the belief. So we'll see as schools execute.
I love that it also requires a shift for some teachers to think of themselves more as mentors and facilitators of the learning experience and someone who guides and as you said, of course, a lot of it is about giving feedback, which I think a lot of us feel like we do that already, but because it comes right next to a number and right next to a letter grade, that sometimes the feedback gets lost. So I love that idea of well, let's just get rid of the distraction. Let's just focus on the feedback here.
How often have you seen a kid get something back that's graded, and you spent all this time giving them really thoughtful mind, and they look at the grade and they shove it in their backpack?
Yeah.
And you're like, are they ever going to read that? Probably not. Not if they didn't like the grade or didn't believe it. They don't have a choice. You give it without a grade, they don't know whether it's good enough to put in their portfolio. They don't know if they should keep trying, and if they should, they don't know what they're supposed to do unless they read your feedback. It forces them to actually internalize what you've said to them.
Yeah.
And English teachers spend hours giving thoughtful feedback, and about half the kids ever bother to look at it or try to internalize it. And that's demoralizing as a teacher. It's like, I'm giving you my best advice,
Right.
and I'm spending hours doing it, and as soon as you look at your grade, I'm not 100% sure you're ever, because that's all you seem to care about.
So funny, because just before this, I was giving back some essay tests, and I withhold the number to the very end of the period.
Right.
And I think they think
Right.
it's this painful thing. They're waiting in anticipation. I'm like, no, you have to do your self-assessment first.
Right, because you want them to grow, and you know you can help them, and you want to give them advice, and you want them to listen. If they're not listening, it's like, where's the grade? Where's the grade? Where's the grade?
Right.
And because it's a game for them, it's a game of high stakes, and it's not irrational for them to think that way. They're not being irrational, but we've created an irrational system that forces them to be irrational. There's a great scene in the movie Most Likely to Succeed, which is it's a movie about what's wrong with the system.
Yeah.
There's this math teacher in Denver who's talking to a room full of kids saying, would you rather, if I could create the best course you've ever had, where you learn the most you've ever had and you feel incredibly fulfilled at the end, but you can't get a grade that helped, or just an easy A, but you don't really learn it, what would you change? And the kids look at each other like, is he kidding? And he's thinking, here it comes. And they go, the grade. And you just rip this guy's heart out. He's just like, and the kids look at you, well, I'm not here to learn.
Right.
I'm here to play the game. And I'm sorry, most people who dedicate their lives to being teachers think they're here to teach kids to learn, not to help them figure out the best way to game the system. So when you have to game a system against its own intent, it's the wrong system. And that's the problem. So
we're getting towards the end of our interview now, but I just wanted to ask one more question. A colleague of mine wanted to ask, there's a conversation on this campus right now about how this sort of learning and assessment actually affects the use of our use of space, our use of classrooms, and do you think this will change how we think of the traditional classroom and our spaces?
It can, it doesn't have to, but it could. And this mastery assessment, because each kid's moving at a different time scale, has a need for more group work and more capacity for kids to have some individual time to work. There's going to be less full cohort instruction. Because kids are going to stratify at different paces more quickly and more frequently. So this idea, I teach one thing to many and you absorb it and tell me if you learned it. You can still do it that way, and you can still use the mastery's assessment system, but it will increasingly become obvious that a bunch of your kids are sitting there and they've mastered all the standards you're trying to teach because they have credits for them, and they're sitting in your class with credits, and so it might be time to give them something else to do. So it forces differentiated instruction. It really does require the teacher to differentiate their class now, and we'll talk about it, but it's hard to do. So, but that happens now. I mean, you have kids who are ready to ace the test halfway through your lesson, and they're sitting there waiting for the rest of the class to catch up. And you have other kids who are cramming till minutes before the test, and they're just not ready, and they all take the test at the same time. So I think when you start assessing kids, I forgot to say, which I hope is obvious, that kids only get assessed their portfolios when they want to be, when they feel ready. So it gives a student a little bit of control over readiness. Now, we can monitor pace. If a kid's halfway through their freshman year and they haven't submitted for any credits, then the adults will go, you should have roughly 6 to 8 credits by now to get in the game. So it's not like the adults are going to let them go to sleep. But there's some real student agency in here, and the ability for students to feel a little sense of control, that if I need a couple more days to get ready, I have a couple more days. If I'm done and I don't want to have to worry about this anymore, and I want to prove I'm done and I want to move on to something else, I can do that as well. So that's kind of how it should be. And prior to formal education, if we were all apprentices in a workshop and we had a master working for us, they would learn that you mastered your skill first, and they're not going to keep making you do it. They're like, you go over there and do things. These guys will keep doing it, and you master, and I'm still working on it, right? Because it's called mastery. That's why it was called master and apprentice, that your job is to become a master, to be masterful. That's why we called it the master transcript. We want kids to persist to mastery. If I could put one bumper sticker on my school, it would be persist to mastery. Because we don't, unless you just remove them along. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
Great.
joining us.
Thanks.
It's been
Yeah, it's
great to
fun.
have
Thank
you.
you, Scott.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are joining the effort. It'll be an important one. Yeah.
That was Scott Looney, head of school at Hawkins School in Cleveland, Ohio, and founder of the Mastery Transcript Consortium.
Join us next time as we get to know our new Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Brent Knaft. He'll be chatting with us about NeuroTeach, the Mastery Transcript, and we'll finally get to know just how many bow ties he owns.
Join us then.